Love them or hate them, visual effects are a vital component of just about every major Hollywood movie these days, and like any tool, its effectiveness typically comes down to how and why it's used. Though often used as a crutch by lazy filmmakers who will fix it in post, CGI can also be extremely versatile in the hands of the right artists, dazzling not only the eyes, but also the heart and the mind. The mind-boggling transformations speak for themselves, taking seemingly sterile, uncinematic footage shot in front of a colored screen and giving it the much-needed magic touch. As these films created iconic movie locations out of thin air, added complex digital characters into the mix, and cleverly concealed elements of the filmmaking process, let's peel back the curtain and see just how different the raw footage looked. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and this is what 10 great movies look like without visual effects. Number 10, The Matrix. Let's kick things off with a groundbreaking triumph of VFX that continues to remain an innovative benchmark 20 years later. The Matrix popularized the concept of bullet time, of depicting action in slow motion while freely passing the camera through the scene, and it's a technique that continues to be used widely across blockbuster films today. The various bullet time sequences throughout still look impressively seamless, so much so that it's easy to forget that much of the marquee shots were actually captured against a green screen. In this controlled environment, a bespoke camera rig captured footage with a full 360 degrees of coverage, allowing the Wachowskis to effectively stitch frames together and imply a seamless camera pan around the subject. The slickness of the effect blew audiences away back in 1999 and remains an absolute marvel of cinematic engineering today. While contemporary blockbusters routinely fail to correctly match the lighting between green screens and backdrops, The Matrix still looks pretty much perfect. Hell, even the countless imitators look pretty good as well. Number 9, Avengers Infinity War. Avengers Infinity War is one of the most ambitious blockbusters of all time, at least until Endgame came along, and in order to fully deliver the superhero team-up extravaganza audiences were expecting, the Russo brothers employed a mind-boggling 2,900 visual effects shots throughout the film. By far the most complex aspect of Infinity War from a technical perspective anyway was translating Josh Brolin's performance capture work as Thanos into a convincing digital rendering while retaining the tactile qualities of his performance. After all, Thanos needed to be more than a big purple face and a chin that only a mother could love, as we've all witnessed how bad CGI can ruin a potentially compelling feat of performance capture. Looking at you, Justice League. As extensive B-roll footage of the shoot makes clear, Infinity War's effects team also had to deal with the size differences between Thanos and Brolin by attaching a pole to Brolin's performance capture suit in order to give the artists a reference for Thanos' head. To further lessen the technical load, very few elements in Thanos' scenes are actually practical, bar a few environmental objects and the actors he's working against. This gives the artists as much freedom as possible to figure out the precise geometry of Thanos' spatial positioning relative to Brolin. Though it wouldn't be fair to call Thanos a seamless creation, he is a giant purple alien after all. The villain's uncommon expressiveness is an undeniable triumph. Number 8, Life of Pi. Ang Lee's epic survival drama Life of Pi went on to win 4 Oscars, one of which was for its staggeringly convincing visual effects. Long considered unfilmable due to its technical complexity, requiring a young boy to be convincingly stranded at sea with a Bengal tiger, Lee ultimately decided to shoot all of the film's ocean scenes in a purpose-built wave tank. Extensive behind-the-scenes footage reveals how this wave tank basically resembled a giant swimming pool, with Suraj Sharma acting with a prop boat and occasionally opposite a stuffed tiger intended to act as a stand-in for the digital one. Essentially then, if you had a couple $1 million spare and a team of talented VFX artists on hand, you could have shot Life of Pi in your bedroom with your stuffed teddy bear. The absurd photorealism of the tiger and the ease with which the audience believes that we're actually seeing a genuine oceanic environment is a major testament to VFX house Rhythm and Hughes, who tragically filed for bankruptcy less than 2 weeks before winning their Oscar for the movie. Number 7, District 9. Neil Blomkamp's Oscar-nominated District 9 might just boast the best visual effects of any movie made for a mere $30 million, though it certainly helps keep costs low when Peter Jackson's your producer. Despite its lo-fi mockumentary style and largely unknown cast at the time anyway, the film employs extensive visual effects in almost every scene, utilizing motion capture with stand-in performers for the alien prawns, which was then translated into a digital likeness by Image Engine. The absurd absurdly realistic texture design of the creatures is especially impressive considering how much of the film takes place in broad daylight, which didn't allow Image Engine much opportunity to mask the limitations of their work with darkness. And yet, watching District 9 a decade later, the prawns remain ludicrously convincing creations, as is vital for the audience to eventually empathize with them. Had it not been up against Avatar for the Best Visual Effects Oscar in 2010, it surely would have taken the gong home. Number 6, Mad Max Fury Road. Though Mad Max Fury Road gets a ton of cred from film fans for its emphasis on practical effects, the film's reliance on CGI is often underestimated, and that's precisely why it's so good. George Miller isn't just a veteran action filmmaker, he's also got decades of experience working with complicated visual effects and animation, having directed Babe, Pig in the City and both Happy Feet movies. That's right, the guy responsible for epic action sequences like this also brought this into existence. But this experience ensured that he knew exactly when to implement pervasive VFX throughout the movie and when not to. And for the most part, the effects are extremely tough to pick out. The big money shot of the movie, where a tanker explodes with Max being catapulted across the screen, contains far more digital elements than are immediately obvious. In fact, aside from the explosion itself and the tanker caught in the middle of it, every other vehicle and human element was composited in post-production, most obviously Hardy himself. Common sense tells us that Hardy wasn't really being swung from car to car while a cacophonous explosion detonated behind him, but given that the end result lacks any of the usual CGI giveaways, namely inconsistent source lighting, you'd be forgiven for assuming that they did it for real. Number 5, Star Wars The Last Jedi. Whatever you make of Star Wars The Last Jedi, there's no denying the brilliance of its visual effects, from the various space battles to its crowning achievement, Supreme Leader Snoke. R.I.P. in pieces. Audiences are always in good hands with George Lucas's own VFX company Industrial Light and Magic, and teaming them with performance capture maestro Andy Serkis to create Snoke was a slam dunk before shooting even started. Regardless of Snoke's divisive fate, the character is an exceptional achievement in photorealism, especially given the grotesque nature of his appearance and how little he ultimately resembles Serkis. It is a perfectly harmonious combination of effects and performance, ensuring the audience doesn't quite know where one begins and the other ends. And let's face it, if you're an actor working opposite a part digital creation, you couldn't ask for a better scene partner than Serkis. Number 4, Logan. Though Logan was mounted as a more grounded and gritty alternative to the mainline X-Men movies, it still featured its fair share of digital effects elements, especially once a big, hairy Wolverine clone was hurled into the mix. While the effect itself is extremely well done, it obviously draws attention to itself given that, well, there's only one Hugh Jackman walking around. But Jackman's face is actually cut and pasted into the movie more often than you might assume, with director James Mangold daringly replacing the face of a stuntman with Jackson's own during the car chase sequence at Logan's hideout. Unless you've seen the VFX breakdown for yourself, you'd likely never guess it wasn't Jackman driving the car himself. Considering how challenging these CGI-heavy close-ups are to get right, it's a truly ballsy move on the part of Mangold and the film's effects team. Number 3, The Martian. To the surprise of absolutely nobody, The Martian's Mars set sequences weren't actually shot on Mars, you know, with the production often using Jordan's Wadi Rum Valley to double for the planet's surface. However, if you thought that every single scene set on Mars was filmed at the sandy Jordian location, you'd be understandably wrong. In fact, director Ridley Scott shot most of them on a soundstage in Hungary, and given the greatest sense of control this would afford any filmmaker, namely from the elements of nature, it makes a lot of sense. It's incredibly difficult to spot where the practical set ends and the digital one begins in the final film though, in turn doing what the very best CGI always does, transport the audience to another world, quite literally in this case. Number 2, Deadpool. Despite Deadpool's modest $58 million budget for the standards of superhero fare anyway, the film is absolutely awash in gnarly and creative visual effects, and it certainly helps that director Tim Miller cut his teeth working as a VFX artist. The overwhelming majority of the film's CGI is deployed during the extensive highway sequence, which effectively serves as a narrative wraparound throughout the entire movie. Interestingly, this same sequence was created entirely in CGI prior to the film's release to convince Fox to greenlight the picture at all. And though much of the scene in the final film was indeed shot practically on a Vancouver highway, anything more than a basic action beat was ultimately completed against a green screen on a soundstage. It's not quite fair to say that Deadpool's CGI is invisible, though that is largely by design, and by giving the entire film a glossy sheen, it helps prevent the lower fidelity effects from standing out too much. Given the price tag, what Miller achieved is really quite incredible. Number 1. The Avengers. The Avengers might seem quaint by recent MCU standards, but there's no denying the ingenuity of its climactic Battle of New York, which saw writer-director Joss Whedon call upon ILM to recreate New York digitally from the ground up. Despite how brilliantly the scene evokes the real New York, the majority of the sequence was actually shot on sound stages in New Mexico and Cleveland, with ILM recreating the city by mapping roughly 250,000 images of Manhattan. That's not to forget that several of the superheroes, namely the Hulk and Iron Man, were kitted out in performance capture suits. As such, watching the finished sequence must have been quite the exercise in cognitive dissonance for all involved. So that's our list. I hope I haven't ruined these movies too much by pulling back the curtain, but I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. And while you're there, could you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye!